Silas Ward was riding his boundary when he first saw it, what appeared to be wreckage hunched against his fence post. Getting closer, the form coalesced. Human, child, bound to the wood like unwanted livestock. A rough wooden sign bounced from the boy's neck, shifting minutely in the wind. Enemy of the white man. The boy was no more than 10 years old. His skin was darkened and bruised, his clothes ripped, and his wrists tied with rough rope that had bitten into the skin. Dried blood streaked his arms. He wasn't struggling, but he was alive. Barely. Silas rode down slowly, his hand close to the pistol at his hip. Every tale his father had ever spun him of raids and war parties rang through his mind. For a moment he hesitated. What if the child was bait? What if warriors lay in wait in the hills, about to strike? But something in this did not seem like the work of a warrior. The way the boy had been left, flaunted. This was no missive from native warriors. This was the handiwork of white men. As his shadow fell across the child, the boy's eyes opened. Dark, empty, and silent. Not quiet, but completely silent in a manner that was expressive of something shattered much deeper than terror. Silas had heard that expression on the faces of animals that had been hit too hard to scream. He went down beside the boy, trying to find some glimmer of recognition. A fight. But there was nothing. No crying, no begging, no sound. The kind that hurt your chest to see. When Silas extended his hand for the sign, the child winced but did not retreat. He was too frail to push him away. The wooden board was cumbersome, not merely in its weight but in purpose. It was intended to cause pain. Silas could see tiny holes along the top edge as he raised it. Other signs had been hung there previously. This child had been paraded about, branded repeatedly, like some living poster of intolerance. The boy attempted to speak, but his voice was absent. His lips moved tremulously, then ceased. Whether it was fear, injury, or something more profound, Silas didn't know. But those eyes, they were screaming. Suddenly, the noise of horses shattered the stillness. Laughter ensued. The merciless, wild kind of laughter that could only be produced by men who felt they had done something brag-worthy about. 3 riders, possibly more, closing in quickly. Silas gazed down at the boy, and then over to the tree line where the riders headed. His every instinct was to turn away. Let the drama be played out. It wasn't his affair. He'd been raised with that reasoning, with the clandestine warnings not to trust their kind. But then the boy looked up at him, eyes not hoping, not even pleading, just accepting, as if he already knew that kindness wasn't something white men did for his kind. That glance shattered me. Without another moment, he pulled out his knife and sliced through the boy's bonds. The child's hands fell limp to his sides, too exhausted to move. Silas lifted him up. He couldn't have been more than a bag of grain in weight, and put him on his horse, positioning the boy in front of him. "Hanging on?" he breathed. A faint nod. The boy held the horn of the saddle, hardly aware. Silas coaxed the horse on, not too hard. The kid would not make it off alive if he fell. Coming up behind, the riders were gaining on them, their voices more distinct. Cackling at their message, ensuring it was noticed, warning other savages not to cross their boundaries. As Silas's cabin appeared, secluded in a grove and screened from the main trail, he experienced a shiver of security. It was nothing much. One room with a hearth, a table, and a bed worn soft by years of use. But it was cover. He assisted the boy from the saddle. As the child had stumbled, Silas caught him, and for a split second, the world was reduced to one easy action, a man catching someone who couldn't stand on his own. Then Silas saw what he was looking at. A rip in the boy's shirt revealed his back. Scars, some old, some new, not accidental. They formed patterns. Someone had made use of this boy as a living canvas. A warning, a message, a target. Within the cabin, Silas kindled the oil lamp and placed the boy down on his bed. In the warm light, his state appeared even more dismal. Cracked lips, hollow cheeks, starved, dehydrated. But still, those eyes tracked him, tired and vigilant as if preparing for agony. Silas poured water and brought the cup to the boy's lips. He drank hungrily, water running from the corners of his mouth as his body recalled how to swallow. When he finally stopped, he looked up, his eyes softer now, perhaps even thankful. "Your name is?" Silas asked. The boy opened his mouth. Nothing. He probed his throat, then shook his head. Whether mute or merely unable to speak any longer, Silas had no idea. The boy fought with the rope still wrapped around his neck, attempting to free himself from the wooden sign. His fingers quivered, struggling with the knot. Silas moved closer, carefully lifting it over his head. The boy breathed a deep sigh, as if the burden of the world had at last been removed. Then Silas flipped the board over. Eroded on the back, barely legible in the weathered wood, were ominous words. "Property of Clayton Reeves. Return if found." Silas's stomach churned. He recognized the name. So did every person in the territory. Teen Clayton Reeves, ranch baron, land king, a man with the influence to destroy anyone who got in his way. And now, it appeared, a man who branded children as threats and property. The boy saw him read the name. No surprise in his expression, only that same resigned immobility. He knew precisely what the board declared. He'd carried it before. And then the horses again, this time closer. Through the tiny window of his cabin, Silas watched as torchlight danced between the trees. The boy also noticed it. His body stiffened this time, and for the first time, there was fear in his eyes. Not the quiet despair, but naked terror. Silas moved to grab the rifle over his fireplace, loaded, prepared. 3 men, perhaps 4, were closing in, and they anticipated that they would be able to locate their message right where they'd set it down. The boy stumbled to his feet, shaky and frail. He gestured to the rear of the cabin, attempting to slip away, attempting to shield Silas. Even at this point, he was attempting to shield someone else from the agony he'd endured. But Silas refused. This kid was not a message, and he was not going back, damn sure not. Not tonight. Silas Ward stood quietly, rifle clutched in his fist, the burden of his choice pressing down heavier than the night air that swirled about him. Behind him, the boy was creeping, not to escape, but to hide. Even after all of that, the child was still attempting to shield someone else. Outside, the voices sounded more urgent. They weren't just looking for a message now. They were hunting for something, and with the furious snap in their tone, they already knew it was gone. Then there was the call. "Silas Ward, we know you're in there." Silas's gut fell. They had heard his name. This was not chance. They were here for him. He gestured towards the bed, but the boy was already behind it, crawling, his instincts active despite his fatigue. "We're coming in, Ward. You have something that belongs to Clayton Reeves." The front door shuddered as the butt of a rifle slammed against it. Silas stayed where he was, weapon ready but not raised. Through the window he saw them. 3 men in the torchlight, shadows at their backs. Possibly more. "I don't know what you're talking about," Silas called out, his voice steady despite the thundering in his chest. "Don't play dumb. You took the boy. We discovered the cut ropes at your fence line." So they'd already made the rounds. This had all been thought out ahead of time. The boy had been left as bait, just to see who would be silly enough to show mercy. Then they'd come back to punish both the rescuer and the rescued. The boy shook where he huddled, but in his eyes, Silas read something beyond fear. Guilt, as if he thought that everything that was happening was his fault, that being kind always had consequences. "Open the door, Ward, or we'll burn you out." Silas scanned the cabin. One window, one door, unyielding walls. No way out. He could struggle, but he wouldn't defeat them, not alone. He'd live if he surrendered the child, but what price would he pay? And then he saw it, hidden under the child's ragged sleeve, a scar, a tiny deliberate R seared into his skin. A brand. Clayton Reeves had taken more than this boy. He had branded him. A flame burned within Silas, hot and savage. He'd witnessed a lot of cruelty in life, had even turned a blind eye once or twice. But marking a child like livestock, that was a line he didn't even know existed. Last chance, Ward. Silas grabbed the wooden sign and cracked open the door. He flung the board out onto the porch. It landed with a thud, the words, "Enemy of the white man," glowing in the firelight. "There's your sign," he shouted. "Now get off my land." A different voice replied, young, arrogant. "We ain't here for the sign, old man. We're here for the boy." "What boy?" Silas inquired, emerging outside, rifle held low but at his shoulder. "I discovered your sign. I took it home, that's all." The leader moved forward, tall and lean, with eyes that belonged to a man who reveled in cruelty. "Then you won't mind if we look inside, just to be certain." From within the cabin, the boy stirred. Silas heard it. So did they. The three of them turned as one toward the noise, like dogs picking up a scent. The leader's voice was slick now, menacing. "See? That boy. He's got information Mr. Reeves wants. About water, about his people, and Mr. Reeves don't like it when his property vanishes." Silas's jaw tightened. Property. "Been with us for months," the man went on. "Real handy, once you break 'em in. Don't say much anymore, though. We had to fix that. The pieces fit together, the scars, the silence, the blank stare. They hadn't taken the boy so much as they'd annihilated him, remolded him into something they could manipulate. You give him to us and we forget this ever occurred," the man said. "You keep him, and we inform Mr. Reeves you've stolen his property. He don't take kindly to thieves." Another sound came from the cabin, weak, unsteady. The youngest gunman started toward the door. "There he is." Silas stepped between him and the house, blocking his path. "Move, Ward. This is your last warning." Silas took a breath. "What my father taught me about right and wrong, I've been thinking about it," he said calmly. "And I've decided. Some things are worth dying for." The leader's hand moved toward his gun. Silas raised his rifle. "That boy in there, he ain't property. He ain't a tool. He's a child. And any man who brands a child like livestock," his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, "needs to answer for it." The night froze, breathless. Torches flickered in the darkness, casting wild shadows on men who had made their choices. And then, thunder. Hoofbeats. Dozens of them. Fast. The shooters spun, faces clenching with surprise. Out of the trees rode riders, 6 at least, painted faces, war paint, spears and rifles at their sides. They weren't ranchers, they weren't townspeople, they were warriors. The boy within the cabin emitted a sound, his first. A gasping, shattered sob. Recognition. "Well, hell," growled the gang leader, his bravado ebbing. This just got interesting. The warriors stood wide in a semicircle around the cabin. Their leader advanced, a gray-haired man, an old face, iron eyes. He scanned the scene, the white men, the torches, the wooden sign on the ground. He spoke, quick and deep, in his own language. From within the cabin, the boy responded. The exchange was short, but the air was charged with tension at each word spoken. Silas didn't require translation to comprehend. The boy was making excuses, and with each excuse the elder's face grew more stern. "That's far enough," shouted the gunman, brandishing his gun. "This is white man's business." The warrior regarded him with disdain. The child is my grandson. Silence. Silas saw the last piece of the puzzle fall into place. The silence, the sign, the scars. They hadn't abducted a child. They'd abducted a chief's grandson. Wait, we didn't know, the youngest gunman stuttered. You knew he was a child, the chief spat. You knew he couldn't protect himself. You knew what you did was wrong. The leader attempted to regain control. He belongs to Clayton Reeves. Got documents to back it up. Show them. I don't have them on me. Then you have nothing. The chief looked at Silas. You cut the ropes. Silas nodded. You gave him water. Another nod. You stood between him and these men, knowing you might die. Yes. The chief gazed for a long time. Then he got down from his horse and approached the cabin, slow, peaceful, not afraid. His eyes didn't leave the porch. Grandfather, the whispered word from inside. The boy's first word, heavy with years of pain and relief. The chief stood at the door and glanced at Silas. May I? Silas moved aside. What they saw next was not a scene. It was a reunion. A boy and his grandfather, their voices knotted with joy and pain, and years of things that couldn't be spoken. 3 horses were backing up outside, their riders facing towards them. Silas could see it in their eyes. They weren't waiting to hear judgment. They were riding away to warn Clayton Reeves. The leader was already riding. But justice wasn't finished yet. When the chief stepped out of the cabin, he carried his grandson in his arms. The boy looked impossibly small against his grandfather's broad chest. But for the first time since Silas had found him, there was peace in those dark eyes. You're not going anywhere, the chief said softly, but his voice rang across the yard like a death sentence. The gang leader shifted in his saddle, his tone defensive, but his voice betrayed his fear. You can't stop us. We're on American territory. This land belonged to my people before your people even knew it existed, the chief replied, eyes fixed on the 3 men. Before your papers. Before your laws. His voice sharpened. And you stole my blood. The youngest gunman's horse danced beneath him, sensing his fear. Look, we were just obeying orders. Clayton Reeves said, Clayton Reeves. The chief uttered the name as if venom. The man who kidnaps children. The man who sets fires to houses. The man who thinks paper entitles him to own human souls. Silas waited close by, rifle still at the ready, his gaze darting back and forth between the riders and the warriors, closing in around them. The boy, still nestled in the arms of his grandfather, started whispering, his voice growing louder with each passing word. The chief listened, then regarded Silas with a glance that held both thanks and something more profound. Respect. My grandson tells me you gave him food, water. You decided to protect him instead of yourself. Silas shifted uneasy. Any good man would have done the same. No, the chief said stoutly. A lot of men would have left him. Some would have brought him back for bounty. You stepped between him and danger. You knew the price, and you paid it. The leader sneered. Oh, all sense and feel, but the boys marked property. And taking property, that's a hanging crime. That was the wrong thing to say. The calm of the chief left him, and in its place was the icy anger of a man who had seen too much suffering. He carefully laid down his grandson and took a step forward. You talk of hanging. His tone was not loud, but each syllable bore the authority of justice. You mark children and talk of hanging. The gunmen were hemmed in. The warriors' faces were rock, impassive, their horses rolling with agitated energy. Here is what will occur, the chief informed him. You will take you back to Clayton Reeves. You will inform him his property has been taken back by its rightful family. You will inform him that if he tries to find the boy, he will get more than he ever asked for. And if we don't, the leader inquired, his voice shaking, hand shaking on his reins. The smile of the chief was the most frightening Silas had ever witnessed. "Then you won't be going back to anyone at all." Silence followed, electric and heavy. Torches splintered in darkness, horses panted. At last, the gang leader pulled his reins and guided his horse into the woods. The other two trailed after, vanishing into darkness from whence they came. But Silas knew the true danger hadn't passed. When the hoofbeats had faded into the darkness, the chief looked at Silas. His face was somber. "Clayton Reeves will come, with a lot of men, with weapons. He will not take this loss." Silas nodded, knowing. By rescuing the boy, he'd started something that couldn't be stopped. "I know. You can leave," the chief said. "Take what you can bear and get gone. There's no dishonor in that." Silas regarded the boy, now standing on his own 2 feet, still weak but no longer broken. The defeat in his eyes had been replaced by something else. Hope. "No," Silas said softly. "I guess I'm through running from what's right." The chief regarded him, then nodded as if confirming something he'd suspected for a long time. "My grandson tells me you are not like other white men. He tells—" "Your eyes do not look cold." The boy took 1 step forward, slowly but steadily. He raised his head to Silas and said something in his own language, voice clear and firm despite all he had been through. "He asks what your name is," the chief translated. "Silas Ward." The boy repeated it slowly, then added something else. "He says he will remember the name of the man who freed him from his ropes. He says his children will learn your name, and their children after them." Something shifted in Silas's chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "Tell him I'm honored," the chief translated. The boy smiled, just a little, but it was real. The first smile Silas had seen from him. The chief placed a hand on Silas's shoulder. "You have given me back my blood. This debt cannot be repaid with words." "There is no debt," Silas replied, "just what needed doing. When Reeves arrives, and he will arrive, you won't be meeting him alone." Before Silas could answer, the chief was already giving orders to his fighters. They nodded and disappeared into the trees, silent, unseen, like smoke on the wind. "Where are they heading?" Silas asked. "To see, to wait. Reeves believes that this land belongs to him, but he doesn't know. We do. Each trail, each hollow, each trap. He will discover that it is easier to take a child than to keep one." The boy pulled at the sleeve of his grandfather, whispering something in an urgent tone. "He wishes to present you with something," the chief explained. The boy stooped down under his worn-out shirt and produced a tiny object, a piece of carved bone on a frayed leather thong. In all that had been stripped from him, he'd managed to keep this one thing intact. "He tells me it was crafted by his father," said the chief, emotion thickening his voice. "It is supposed to defend the wearer from harm. He says you require it more than he does currently." Silas dropped to his knees and took the gift in reverence. As he rested the cord over his head, the heft of it was heavier than bone. It was faith. It was kinship. It was something holy. 3 days thereafter, Clayton Reeves arrived, just as the chief had foretold. He was accompanied by 15 men, sufficient firepower to burn a small town to the ground. Yet, upon arriving at Silas Ward's cabin, they found nothing but an empty cabin and a wooden sign pinned to the door. It stated, "Some things are not for sale." The search for the boy and the Indian sympathizer went on for 2 weeks, but the country yielded no leads. Every trail disappeared, every rumor died out, and every evening Reeves' men talked of shadows that crept along without wind, and the feeling of eyes upon them from where they could not look. In time they quit and rode back to town, empty-handed, rattled, and uncommunicative. Silas Ward was never heard of in the territory again, But occasionally only, a traveler moving through the tall hills would tell tales of a white man living with the tribes, a man who had come to know that family was not about blood or color, but standing between the people you loved and the nothing that would consume them. The boy became a man who stood between two worlds, a bridge, a voice, a teller of tales. And when he recited this tale to his children, he always started with the same words. There was a man named Silas Ward who saw a child rather than an enemy. The carved bone amulet was handed down through generations, along with the tale of the white rancher who showed everyone that courage is not a matter of skin color. It's a matter of doing what is right, when all else says, walk away. Now, click the video on your screen to listen to a story even stronger than this one. A story with an ending so surprising, it'll linger with you long after it ends. Click now